25 years ago, the airstrikes began. Swift and intense, but they hardly came as a surprise. Saddam Hussein had, after all, been repeatedly warned: withdraw from Kuwait or else. But Iraq's leader remained defiant, ensuring a war that rained devastation on the people of Iraq.
The Iraqi invasion to Kuwait was the pinnacle of the tyrannical regime at that time. It plunged Iraq into an endless cycle of pain. All the subsequent events were a result of that wrong action.
From the outset, Operation Desert Storm was intended to be a short campaign, and it was. The Iraqi army surrendered to the coalition of Arab and Western forces in less than 90 days. The consequences of the war were to last much longer. Saudi Arabia's decision to call on American military power to help push the Iraqis out of Kuwait enraged the future al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden. He had unsuccessfully offered his own fighters to the cause, fresh from victory against the Soviets in Afghanistan, and the decision to allow Western troops to remain in Saudi Arabia, Islam's holy land, reinforced the anti-Western focus of the newly formed al-Qaeda. For the people of Iraq, the real suffering began after the invasion of Kuwait was over. Within days of the ceasefire, Iraq was at war with itself. Two uprisings, one in the Kurdish north and another by mainly Shia in the south, were put down by Saddam Hussein. Tens of thousands of people died in the month-long rebellion. Then an era of comprehensive and crippling international sanctions began. It brought far more than just economic ruin. Childhood malnutrition rates would spike. For families throughout the country, reliable medical care became extremely hard to obtain. Many wondered then, and still wonder now, why Saddam Hussein was allowed to remain in power while his people were made to suffer. That suffering got even worse a decade later. In the wake of 9/11 and the invasion of the Taliban's Afghanistan, the U.S. turned its attention to Iraq once more. Under the supposed suspicion there were weapons of mass destruction here, the U.S. invaded again. The fighting would last far longer and be far bloodier than the U.S. and its coalition partners had anticipated. The country has never recovered. Here on the streets of Baghdad, suspicions run deep.
The Americans at first were looked at as liberators, but then they were seen as completely the opposite. Iraqis saw them as having dismantled the Iraqi army and built the new Iraq on sectarian lines.
And anger still lingers.
Before invading Iraq, George W. Bush said he would make Baghdad like a paradise. Instead, he made it into wreckage.
Now, with the rise of ISIL, Iraq is facing its most serious threat yet. Many here feel they know where all this long deterioration began.
All the subsequent events were a result of the Gulf War. Now Iraq is suffering from a foul sectarianism, suffering from the lack of the rule of law and order, and from a fake democracy.
With so many challenges ahead, it's a situation that seems more dire all the time. Mohammed Jamjoom, Jazeera, Baghdad.